I know this is the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and of course we always feel like we're rush, push into the Christmas season. Walmart does a great job of doing that even before Thanksgiving. But today we are looking at Christmas because, believe it or not, this Sunday, the Sunday after Thanksgiving, is the first Sunday of Advent. So we'll be starting here and going all the way through December, celebrating this beautiful occasion of the birth of Jesus Christ. As a matter of fact, we realize that when God steps in, whenever He steps in, ordinarily it's sudden and it's surprising. So our text today is found in the Gospel of Luke, and I want to thank you for joining with us today at Centerville Baptist Church and being a part of our Bible study today and what God has in store for your life and literally all of our lives, because we're studying about the story of Christ coming today. It's in Luke chapter 2, so familiar passage of Scripture, beginning in verse 1, and we're going to read down to verse 7. And in those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. Now, this was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. Now he went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married with him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. And she wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. Well, I'm reminded of a story of World War II. My father was in World War II, and I'm often captivated by what Tom Brokaw said, the greatest generation. And within that story, it's about people who were flying what they called the flying fortresses. They were B-17s and B-24s, and they were huge aircraft, and they were used for bombing missions all over Europe. It was this one particular base that was stationed there, and they were about to go over Germany, and they were going to bomb it. And the chaplain, for some reason, decided at the base that he would ask and request that he ride in the cockpit. Now, he never did. Normally he stayed at the base, and he just dealt with issues that were there with the soldiers and those that were in the Air Force. But believe it or not, it was granted. And so he came to the specific time and place, and he boarded the flying fortress, and they took off. And as they were getting over in Germany, they were being bombarded by anti-aircraft gun. And there was explosions all around the plane. And within that, the chaplain could sense that everyone that was there on the plane, whatever duty they had, it was a tense situation, and they were frightened. They were scared. So he got the microphone, and he held it to his mouth and said these words: I know that this is a dangerous situation, and I know that you all are somewhat frightened, but I want you to know that God is here among us, and He is going to be with us, and He will never leave us. Now, in those planes, they had gunners, and one of the gunners is a tail gunner. And so this tail gunner, who was in the very back of the plane, and which he had this machine gun by which he was to kind of defend the flying fortress, got on his microphone and said, well, chaplain, God may be with you up there in the cockpit, but I don't see Him around here in the back. And about that time, a shell from any aircraft shot right through the tail of the plane, but it didn't explode. It went right through the bottom of the plane and exited out right at the top of the plane. And the tail gunner was able to turn around and look down and see the ground, and he looked up and he saw the clouds. So he got back on the microphone. He said, correction, God just stepped in. That's the way He is. Now, with that understanding, it is when everything seems dangerous. We don't think God's around, but He is. In the setting of Luke chapter 2, it was a dangerous time to live. Now, I know that we speculate about how easy they had it, but listen, their days are just as difficult as your day or my day. Now, think with me, if you will. First of all, they were taxed to the hilt. I mean, can you identify with that? And can you have some kind of empathy with that? I mean, taxes galore. Not only that, but they had to deal with this ungodly emperor who chose the name Augustus. And he was a tyrant, literally one who was power hungry and just difficult to have him to rule over you. And along with him, they also, these dear people of Israel, had a man named Herod who was ungodly, immoral, unjust, and they had to listen to all of his edicts and all the things that he made them do. Along with these, they also had the church. The Pharisees were very, very questionable about their ethics and what they did and how they did it. So their confidence in the church was waning. They just felt like, there's nothing here for us. Not only that, but for 400 years, now think about that, 400 years, they had never had a word from God. Not since Malachi. They've not had anything at all. Now, we live in a day and a time where we feel like, my goodness, we're pressured by taxes. We have leaders in government who could care less about God and more about things that are politically correct. I mean, for some cities, they can't even use the word Christmas. They can't even use that. Taking Christ and saying to it, it's blatant infringement upon people's rights. We have things that you and I say, they're just horrible to have to live with. And with that, we come to see and to say, is there a word? Is there a word from God? Well, at Christmas time, we certainly, from the times that we have silence and the times that we have songs and literally just the smells of Christmas, it comes to bring us, some brightness in dull lives. So today what we want to do, very briefly, we want to talk about a deity in diapers. The majesty in the mundane. The Son of God as an infant and a baby. So, in light of what happened in 1943 in that flying fortress, let's look where God stepped in and did the unbelievable. So, first of all, we can see that the first person that God steps in is He steps into a young girl's life. We know her as Mary. Now, it is believed and it is tradition that she was not a young adult. She was a teenager, a young girl who had been visited by God and by God saying, you have been favored among all, and you're going to be that which is going to bring the Christ child to the world. After 400 years of silence, you're going to be that instrument that God uses in a wonderful way. Now, even though she had this decision of marrying Joseph, this came quite a shock to her, as you can understand. Even she says, how can this happen to me? I'm a virgin. I've never been with anyone. And you remember what the angel said? With God, nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. Out of that, she realized within time that she was going to have a baby. Now, I can imagine Joseph seeing her as she was going through the stages of pregnancy of the first trimester, second trimester. She's wearing these maternity clothes. For some time, I felt like when I see ladies who are expecting children, they're wearing maternity clothes, I think that is the greatest, neatest thing. I do. Of course, I've never had to wear maternity clothes, but hey, I still think it's a great thing. Well, here she is in maternity clothes, and she's not married, and she's living in Nazareth, and she's engaged but yet not married. And God stepped into her life. God does that. Remember what I said? He does it suddenly. He does it with surprises. The second thing which God stepped in, he stepped into the palace of Augustus. Oh, what amazing God we serve. You see, prophecy said way back in the Old Testament that the Messiah was going to be born in the city of David in Bethlehem. Now, obviously, when Mary and Joseph are up north in Nazareth, and Bethlehem is outside of Jerusalem, to get the two together, especially in this late pregnancy, is an impossible task. But what does God do? Well, God acts suddenly, and he acts surprisingly. So the men that are surrounding Augustus says, well, you know what? I don't think we're getting enough money and revenue. So I think what we need to do is tax the people. And of course, obviously, Augustus is the emperor of the world at this time. Not just Rome and not just Palestine, but the world. And so, if you read this, because normally what we read this is it's only affecting the Jewish people, but that's not what this decree says. They come and said, the only way that we can fairly tax everybody is to say that we have a census and figure out who is who and where is where. So let's just number all the people. Let's get an idea of a head count. Not only that, but how do we do that? Well, some of these people may be hiding. They may be somewhere where we can't find them. So let's make the decree of this. Everyone has to go back to the hometown of where their lineage is. Now think with me. That's everybody in Rome. That's everybody in Europe. That's everybody in Northern Africa. That's everybody in Eurasia. Everybody. Everybody had to travel. So the whole world, as Augustus knew it, was moving toward the towns and the places by which their lineage was. Not because of Augustus, but because of God. God brought it all together. So Joseph, he turns to Mary and sees her great with child and says, well, they're not going to let me register here in Nazareth. I've got to go back, all the way back to Bethlehem. Because you see, I'm from the lineage of David, and that's my ancestors. So I've got to go back there, and you need to go with me because I can't leave you here being so close to having a baby. And not only that, what these people will do if I desert you. So you're coming with me. So God again stepped in. Thirdly, God stepped in a stable. What a humble beginning Jesus Christ had. We find Here's Mary and Joseph arriving, looking for a place to spend the night. No lights were on anywhere. They knocked. The innkeeper hears them, goes to the door and says, "I'm sorry. But over here, you can stay there." Now within that, Mary, after this long journey, and there at this late term in her pregnancy, had no comfort. I mean, she's in a barn, for goodness sake. She had no privacy. Now, I've been with my wife when she blessed me with 2 daughters through the birth of that. But women, when they're delivering a baby, they want that privacy. Well, Mary's just stuck out there in a barn with animals and people all around. And then, if you look, she had no experience of birthing a baby. And I'm here to tell you, Joseph was useless. I mean, we all are as men. All we could do is just like, In fact, have you ever noticed that Joseph, he never says a word through the whole birth? I mean, he's just dumbfounded. He can't even say a word. None of it's recorded, if anything Joseph said. And so she's there with no experience at all, and she's having to birth this baby on her own. There's no midwife. There's no OBGYN. There's nothing. And so she goes through the painful birth of a son, and then all of a sudden, there he is, the Son of God. I've often wondered about that Christmas carol we sing, "No crying he makes." Have you ever heard of a baby not cry? I'm sure he did. I mean, it kind of pictures Jesus as someone who's, he's not even human. No crying he makes. I think he cried that evening. I think the cows heard it. I think the camels heard it. I think the donkeys heard it. I think even the people there in the area, they were living there and sleeping in that inn that night. They heard the baby. With that, we realize the king has come. But he didn't come like normal kings. I mean, can you think of it? He's laid in a manger. That's what animals eat out of. And probably there was some straw laid down there. And his little hands, I mean, he couldn't even feed himself. He couldn't even care for himself. This is the Son of God. It's Jesus Christ as a baby. But yet he's described as the King of Kings. He is the King. I studied and reminded myself of the comparison of what kings do when they go places. I read about the history of Queen Elizabeth. She's on up in years. Well, several years ago, she made a trip to the United States. And she brought her entourage and did a tour and visited several places. But here's what I want you to see. It is reported, factually, that when she came across the Atlantic, she brought 4,000 pounds of luggage. 4,000 pounds. Now the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords came with nothing but God. You see, when God steps in, it's sudden and it's surprising. I hope you know him. But if not, this Christmas season, even today, would you ask the King of Kings to come into your heart as your Lord and your Savior? confessing your sin, and looking to Him. May God bless you.